My name is Emily Ward. I am 38 years old, and I used to believe exhaustion was the heaviest thing I could carry home after a night shift. I was wrong. That morning, I came through my front door with my hospital badge still clipped to my shirt, my feet aching, my hair smelling faintly of antiseptic, and my phone buzzing like someone was trying to wake the dead. Visual, hospital ID badge, scuffed sneakers by the door. It was my mother. 7 missed calls. 9 missed calls. 5 texts. The last one said, I call me when you get home. We need to talk about your father's retirement gift. I remember standing in my kitchen and thinking, that's a strange choice of word. Need to talk about your father's retirement gift. Not ask. Not discuss. Need to talk. Like I was a secretary being briefed on a meeting agenda, I wasn't invited to shape. I poured myself a glass of water and looked around the house I had bought 3 years earlier. It was small. A 2-bedroom craftsman in a neighborhood that was still technically up and coming. The kind of place where you could hear your neighbor's dog barking through the wall. But it was mine. The mortgage was in my name. The deed was in my name. The only other name on any document related to this property is my father's. And that was only because he had co-signed the original loan so I could get a better rate. That had been a favor. He had made that very clear at the closing. We're doing this for you, Emily, so you can get a start. I had thanked him. I had meant it. How? I had no idea, standing in that title company's office, that I was signing the first page of a story I wouldn't understand the ending of for 12 years. The house had been my grandmother's, my father's mother. She had left it to me in her will when I was 26, just after I finished my nursing degree. It was a modest bequest. The house was old, the foundation needed work, and it sat on a street that had seen better decades. But to me, it was everything. It was the first thing that had ever been mine. I remember the day my grandmother gave me the key. She was in hospice by then, her hands thin and papery, but her eyes were clear. She said, "This is yours, Emily, not your mother's, not your father's, yours. I'm giving it to you because you're the only one who ever came to visit me without asking for something." I didn't know what to say. I just held the key and nodded. My father was her only child. When she passed, the house should have gone to him by default. But she had made her wishes known, and the will was ironclad. My mother was furious. I remember overhearing her in the kitchen, the week after the funeral, her voice low and sharp. She left it to Emily, the nursing student with no savings. Why would she do that? My father's response was quieter. I couldn't hear the words, but I heard the tone. Dismissive. Nice. Placating. Like he was soothing a child who had been denied a toy. I was 26 then. I didn't understand what I was holding. You. I thought it was just a house, a gift, a connection to a woman I had loved. I didn't know that to my mother. It was a line item, an asset that had escaped her control by a single signature. Oh. And I didn't know that she would spend the next 12 years trying to claw it back under the banner of family. Let me show you how the ledger worked in my family. There were 2 sets of books. One was the official record, the one my mother would recite at dinner parties, at holidays, at any gathering where there was an audience. That book, said Emily, was the responsible one. The dependable one. The one who could be counted on to handle logistics. I organized the family reunions. I booked the hotels. I set up the group chats and the potluck sign-ups and the carpool schedules. I was the one who remembered everyone's allergies and preferences. I was the one who stayed late to clean up. I was the one who drove my grandmother to her doctor's appointments when no one else had time. Visual, old family calendar, dates crossed out in red pen. When I was 14, my mother handed me a stack of bills and said, "Your father and I are going to be late tonight. Can you make sure these get in the mail?" It was a small thing. She was teaching me responsibility. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with a pen and a roll of stamps, filling out envelopes by hand. It took me over an hour. I didn't mind. I was a kid. I wanted to be useful. Then, when I was 17, I found out the truth. My father had been getting collection notices on a credit card he had opened in my name when I was 12. He had maxed it out and let it go to collections. My mother sat me down and explained it with surgical precision. He had a rough year. The business was struggling. We needed to keep the lights on. You're the oldest, Emily. You understand. I did understand. I had to. The card was in my name, and the damage was on my credit report. There was no other option. I worked 2 part-time jobs my senior year of high school to pay it off. I got the collection letters myself, opened them in my car in the school parking lot so no one would see the envelopes. I never told anyone. I just handled it. That was the second ledger, the one no one talked about. In that book, I was the backstop, the one who absorbed the costs, the one who made things disappear. I was the quiet fixer, the person who took on the burdens that no one else wanted, the one whose name went on the paperwork so my parents' names could stay clean. The official ledger said I was the responsible daughter. The hidden ledger said I was the one they used. The first time I heard the phrase, I was 19. My mother had just asked me to co-sign a loan for my younger brother's car. I had just paid off the credit card my father had opened. I had almost no savings. I said I didn't think I could. My mother looked at me with an expression that was almost pity. "Emily, after everything we've invested in you, this is how you want to repay us?" I signed the loan. Of course I did, because the phrase wasn't a question. It was a key. It unlocked the exact mechanism of my guilt, the exact shape of the debt I would never be allowed to repay. After everything we sacrificed for you, those words became the thread that ran through every interaction, every request, every demand. I thought it was true. I thought they had sacrificed everything. I thought my mother had given up her career to raise me. I thought my father had worked himself to the bone to provide for us. I had no reason to doubt it. I was a child. And then I became an adult, and I kept carrying that story with me, even when the details started to fray at the edges. I got my nursing degree. I worked nights. I built a life. I bought a house. I managed my own finances. And through it all, the phrase lingered. After everything we sacrificed for you, it followed me from my childhood bedroom to my dorm room, to my first apartment, to the kitchen of the craftsman house that was supposed to be mine. I was 30 when I started to realize something was wrong. I had been a nurse For 7 years. I had a good salary. I had a retirement account. I had a spreadsheet that tracked every penny I spent. I had done the math. The amount of money my parents claimed to have invested in me, the tuition they said they had paid, the expenses they said they had covered, didn't add up to what they kept asking me for. I had paid for most of my own college with grants and scholarships. I had worked through nursing school. I had been financially independent since I was 23. And yet, every few months, my mother would call with another request, another emergency, another bridge loan, another co-signature. Why? I started to notice that the emergencies always happened around the same time my parents were planning a vacation, or a renovation, or a new car. I started to notice that my brother, the golden child, the one who had gotten the car loan I co-signed, had never once been asked to contribute. I started to notice that my name was on a shocking number of my parents' financial documents. I was on the deed to their house. I was on their checking account as a joint owner. I was listed as a successor on their life insurance policies. I had never signed any of these documents. I had never been told about them. They had just added me. I was 32 when I found the tax records. I was helping my mother organize a filing cabinet in her home office. She had asked me to come over and help sort through the papers. I was supposed to be the responsible one, the one who could be trusted with the messy stuff. I found a folder labeled Property Taxes. Inside, there were copies of the checks I had been sending her for my grandmother's house, the house I lived in, the house I had been paying the property taxes on for years. I had been sending her a check every year, just as I had been told. She had been cashing them and then paying the taxes from her own account. No, I hadn't known. I had assumed she was taking the money and using it to pay the bill. She was, technically, but she was also writing a check from her account and then using my money to replenish it. It was a shell game, a small one, very honest me, but it was a shell game. I didn't say anything. I just filed it away. I didn't know why. I think, at that moment, I was still trying to believe the best. I was still trying to tell myself that there was a logical explanation. That she wasn't skimming, she was just managing. That she wasn't using me, she was just including me. That the phrase, "after everything we sacrificed for you," was a true statement, even if the numbers didn't quite match. The mechanism came into my hands about a year after that. I was refinancing the house. I wanted to get a better rate. And I wanted to get my father's name off the loan. He had co-signed, and I was tired of the annual conversation where he reminded me that he was the reason I had a house. I went to a lawyer to handle the paperwork. Her name was Julia. She was a real estate attorney, and she had the kind of flat procedural tone that I had learned to trust. She reviewed the deed. She reviewed the title. She reviewed the original loan documents and my grandmother's will. And then she found something. Visual. Legal documents spread across a conference table. She said, "Emily, do you know what a life estate is?" I didn't. She explained it to me. My grandmother had not simply given me the house. She had given me the house with a specific clause. The property was mine outright, but the surviving spouse of the previous owner had a legally protected right to occupy the property for the remainder of their life. My grandfather had died long before my grandmother. But the clause had been written broadly. It was a standard boilerplate provision designed to protect a surviving spouse from being evicted. It had never been enforced. It had never been used. But it existed. And it meant that if I ever tried to sell the house, a portion of the sale would have to go to someone. The clause named a surviving spouse. My grandfather was dead. So the clause technically defaulted to my father. My father had a legal claim to a share of the property. Not ownership, but a claim on the proceeds of any sale. A caveat. 100-year-old piece of lawyer language that had been copied from one will to another for decades without anyone ever reading it closely. Julie asked me if I wanted her to research it further. I told her not to. I told her to leave it. I told her it wasn't important. I didn't know why I said that. I think at that moment I was still trying to believe the best. I was still trying to tell myself that my father would never try to take my house. That he would never abuse a clause in his mother's will. That the phrase, "After everything we sacrificed for you," was a true statement, even if I had never seen a spreadsheet that proved it. I should have listened to Julia. The first time my father mentioned the house as an asset, I was 35. It was Thanksgiving. My mother had made her famous turkey. My brother was there with his wife. The conversation turned to retirement. My father had just turned 65. He was talking about downsizing. "We've been looking at some condos in Florida," he said. "We've got some equity in this place, but we'll need a little more to make the numbers work." He looked at me across the table. "Emily, we've been thinking. Since you're living in the house my mother left you, you might want to consider selling and moving somewhere smaller. You could take the profits and buy a nice little condo, and we could take our share and retire comfortably." I set down my fork. I felt a cold, hollow feeling in my chest, like a door had opened onto a dark room I had never seen before. "Your share?" I said. "It's my house. Grandmother left it to me." My mother put her hand on my arm. "Emily, after everything we sacrificed for you," there it was. That phrase, the one I had heard 1,000 times, the one that had justified the credit card, the car loan, the co-signatures, the taxes, the decades of being the one who cleaned up after everyone else. She said it with a smile. Oh, a warm, rehearsed smile, like she was telling me I had spilled something on my shirt. "After everything we sacrificed for you, we just think it's fair that you help us in return. Your father co-signed that loan. He took a risk on you. If it weren't for him, you wouldn't have the house at all. You wouldn't have been able to get the mortgage." I remember the feeling of cold porcelain under my fingers. The plate, the edge of the plate. I just stared at it. I didn't say anything. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I just nodded and said, "I'll think about it." No. That was the first time I began to see the shape of it. The plan. They had always treated the house as a family resource, even though it was legally mine. They had always believed that if they waited long enough, if they applied enough pressure, I would eventually hand it over. I was the agreeable one, the responsible one. Not the doll, and maybe becoming the responsible one, the one who understood. I always understood. That was my role. I was the family's understanding daughter, and understanding meant giving in. I started to push back. Slowly? Oh, quietly. I stopped answering calls immediately. I started letting voicemails go to voicemail. I started saying no to small things. I couldn't help with the reunion this year. I had to work. I couldn't co-sign a new loan for my brother. My credit was tied up. I couldn't cover the property taxes in advance this year. I was saving for a new roof. Every no was met with a variation of that phrase. After everything we sacrificed for you, I didn't argue. I just repeated, "Ma, no." Then 2 years ago, my father had a heart attack. It was a mild one. He was in the hospital for 3 days. I visited him every day. I brought him books. And I sat with him. Now, my mother sat on the other side of his bed, holding his hand. On the 3rd day, the doctor came in and told us he was going to be fine. My mother started crying. She turned to me and said, "Emily, we can't keep doing this on our own. We're getting older. We need to know you're going to take care of us. We need you to understand." I understood. I had always understood. That was the problem. A few weeks later, my mother called me and asked me to come over to the house. She had papers. She wanted to discuss the estate planning. She had prepared a document. Oh, it was a proposal. In the proposal, I would sign over the house to my parents. In exchange, they would leave it back to me in their will. They would manage it until they died, and then I would inherit it. It was such a clean, reasonable, bureaucratic arrangement. It was a shell game. The same shell game I had been playing for years. Visual. Estate planning documents on a kitchen counter. I said I needed to think about it. My mother's face shifted. That warm, rehearsed smile flickered. "After everything we sacrificed for you," she said, her voice a little sharper now, "I would think you'd want to do this for us. It's just paperwork. It's just a formality." I said I'd call her back. I didn't call her back. A year passed. I stayed in the house. I paid my mortgage. I paid my taxes. I replaced the roof. I repaired the foundation. I did everything I was supposed to do. My parents stopped calling as much. I assumed they had accepted. Wow. I was wrong. 6 months ago, my mother called and told me they were coming to visit. "We want to see the house," she said. "We want to see what you've done with it." I was suspicious, but I also wanted to believe. I wanted to show them my work. I wanted them to see the garden I had planted, the kitchen I had remodeled, the bedroom I had painted. I wanted them to see that I had made something out of what I had been given. I wanted them to be proud of me. They arrived on a Saturday. My father walked through the house with a clipboard, like he was doing an inspection. He looked at the windows. He looked at the foundation. He looked at the roof. He said, "You've done a lot with the place, Emily." I felt a small, foolish bloom of pride. "But we've been looking at the numbers," he said. "We've had a real estate agent come by and give us an estimate. The market is good. You could get $300,000 for this place." I said I didn't want to sell. My mother set down her purse. "Emily, after everything we sacrificed for you," she said, her voice calm and final, "you really think you can stop us?" That was the 3rd time I heard the phrase with a new edge. The first time I was 19, and it was a key. The second time I was 35, and it was a lock. This time it was a threat. You really think you can stop us? I didn't answer. I just looked at her. I looked at my father. And I realized in that moment that they weren't asking a question. They had already made their move. They had hired a lawyer. They had filed a claim against my house. Then they were asserting that my father's life estate clause entitled him to a share of the property. They wanted 50%. They had compiled documents. Oh, they had receipts. They had backdated some of them. They had created a narrative in which I had been holding onto the family asset for years, and it was time for the asset to be distributed fairly. They had made it sound like they were just protecting themselves. They had made it sound like I was the one who was being unreasonable. I went back to Julia, the lawyer. I had kept her card. She looked at their filing. She looked at the deed. She looked at the life estate clause. She said, "They have a technical argument. It's a weak one, but it's an argument. It could take a year to litigate. It could cost you $50,000 in legal fees." I asked her what my options were. She said, "You can fight it, or you can settle, or you can find another way." I asked her what she meant by another way. Oh, she looked at me with that flat, procedural expression. She said, "The property is yours. You can do whatever you want with it. But there's a caveat. If you sell, they have a claim. If you refinance, they have a claim. If you lease it, they have a claim. But if you transfer ownership to someone else..." She stopped. I leaned forward. "What do you mean, transfer ownership?" She said, "I can look into it." I told her to look into it. That was the mechanism. I had been sitting on it for years. I had been sitting on the exact tool I needed to dismantle their entire argument. I didn't know it. Knew. But the mechanism wasn't a weapon I had to build. It was already there. It was a simple clause, a bureaucratic lever that I had been told to ignore. And I had ignored it until I didn't. For 6 months, I didn't tell anyone. I just moved. I made plans. Quiet, boring, administrative plans. I opened new accounts. I transferred direct deposits. I changed my passwords. I updated my beneficiaries. I did all the small, tedious, invisible work that a person does when they are preparing to disappear. Visual, spreadsheets, bank statements, a key on a counter. On young, Then, last week, I got the summons. My parents were taking me to court. The hearing was scheduled for Friday. My mother called me and said, "We're going to settle this, Emily. We want you to come to the house. We want to have a conversation, as a family." I said I would be there. I was already planning to be there. But I wasn't going to have a conversation. I arrived at the house on Thursday evening, the night before the hearing. My mother and father were already there. My brother was there with his wife. My mother looked pleased. She had set out appetizers. She was smiling. She was already in the role of the gracious hostess, the matriarch who was trying to protect the family from a messy legal fight. She said, "Emily, after everything we sacrificed for you, we want you to understand that this is not about money. This is about family. This is about fairness. That was the phrase. Delivered publicly. With confidence. In front of my brother and his wife. In front of my father. In front of a dinner table spread with food she hadn't cooked. I said nothing. I just sat down. I opened my bag. I pulled out a folder. A plain manila folder. I put it on the table. I said, I understand you're asserting a claim on my house. I understand you believe you have a right to 50% of the equity because of a life estate clause in my grandmother's will. I understand you've hired a lawyer to enforce that right. And I understand that you've been telling yourselves that this is fair. Now I need. What should you? My mother's smile tightened. Emily, you're making this very difficult. I said, I'm not making anything difficult. I'm just giving you the facts. I opened the folder. I pulled out a single piece of paper. It was a copy of the title transfer I had filed 6 months ago. I slid it across the table. Well, I said, I sold the house 6 months ago. I sold it to a trust. I am not the owner of the property. I am a tenant. Monsieur, of so-and-so. I have a lease. The trust has a 99-year leasehold that supersedes any life estate claim. The life estate applies to the sale of the property. May, but I didn't sell it. I transferred it. It was a gift. It's no longer in my name. There is nothing to attach. There is no equity. There are no proceeds. There is no claim. And none. I am Tony. My father stared at the paper. My mother's face went pale. My brother shifted in his seat. I said, you told me that you were my family. You told me that after everything you sacrificed for me, I had a duty to you. You told me that I couldn't stop you. You were wrong. I stopped you. I stopped you in a way you will never undo. I leaned back in my chair. The trust is irrevocable. The transfer is final. You cannot take my house, because it's not my house to take. Oh, I'm Denise. My mother started to speak. Her voice was sharp and rising. You can't do this. This is our family's property. After everything I cut her off. After everything you sacrificed for me, I said. I shook my head. No, did you know? I have 2 ledgers. One of them is the story you told me. The other one is the truth. And the truth is, you didn't sacrifice anything for me. I was your backstop. I was your credit line. I was the name you put on the papers so you wouldn't have to face the consequences of your own decisions. You didn't sacrifice for me. You took from me. Every time. Every single time. Day. Visual. A single piece of paper on a table. A fork set down. The room was silent. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could hear my father's shallow breathing. I could hear my brother's wife adjusting her chair. No one spoke. Then, in the silence, there was a knock at the door. My mother didn't move. My father didn't move. I stood up and walked to the door. I opened it. There, in the entryway, stood Julia, my lawyer. She was holding a tablet. She said, Emily, I have the final documents. The trust has been fully executed. The lease is recorded. The hallway security will be notified by morning. She looked over my shoulder into the room. She saw my parents. She saw my brother. She said, "Good evening. I'm just here to complete the transfer of the property records. The trust now owns the house. Miss Ward is a tenant. She has a 99-year lease. You are welcome to stay in the property as guests, at our invitation. But you have no legal claim." "None." She held up her tablet. "I have the court filing here. We've already submitted it. The hearing tomorrow is cancelled. There is no case." Nodding. My mother stood up. She was trembling. "You can't do this," she said. "We are your parents. We raised you. We sacrificed." I held up my hand. "No," I said. "No more." I said, "You know what the phrase has always meant to me. After everything we sacrificed for you, it meant I owed you. It meant I had to say yes. It meant I had to be the one who understood. It meant I had to disappear. And I've been disappearing my whole life. I've been erasing myself to make room for you. But I'm done. I'm not going to disappear anymore. I'm going to live in my house, on my terms, in my name, until the day I die. And you're not going to take that from me. You can't. Because I have already given it away to a trust that has a 99-year lease. I don't own it anymore. You can't take what I don't have." I don't have. I need a. Maybe someone to us. My father stood up. He looked at me. His face was red. His hands were shaking. He opened his mouth to speak. I said, "Save it." I walked past him. I walked to the door. I opened it. I said, "The locks are already changed. I have the code. You don't. If you want to come back, you'll need to call me. And I don't answer my phone anymore." I walked out the door. I walked to my car. I got in. I drove home. I didn't look back. That night, my phone started ringing. My mother called. Yes, 6 times. I let it ring. My father called. Mine Sue. 4 times. I let it ring. My brother called. Nanny Bedjay. Once. I let it ring. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't return any of the voicemails. I just sat in my kitchen, in my house, in the house that wasn't mine, in the house that was mine, and I drank a glass of water and listened to the silence. Visual, a silent phone, the green glow of a voicemail indicator. The next morning, I woke up. I made coffee. I sat on the porch. I watched the sun come up. My phone buzzed. I looked at it. It was my brother. A text message. It said, "I didn't know about the credit card. I didn't know about the loan. I didn't know any of it. I'm sorry." I read it. I didn't reply. I waited a week. Then I read the news. My parents' condo deal had fallen through. They had been counting on the money from my house to fund the down payment. Without it, they were stuck. They couldn't afford the new place. They couldn't afford to retire. They had to go back to work. My mother's social media account went quiet. My father stopped posting golf pictures. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel anything except a strange, steady stillness. I had been carrying the weight of their expectations for so long that I had stopped noticing how heavy it was. And now, It was gone. Not because they had apologized, not because they had changed, but because I had simply stopped carrying it. I still live in the house. I still have the lease. I still have the trust. I still have the code. I still have the silence. My mother tried to call me again last week. I didn't answer. She left a message. Her voice was thin. She said, "Emily, after everything." She stopped. She didn't finish the sentence. She just said, "I don't know what to say." And she hung up. I listened to the message. I deleted it. My father sent me a letter. It was a formal, unemotional letter. He wanted to discuss the estate planning again. He said he had made a mistake. He said he was sorry. He said he wanted to reconnect as a family. I read the letter. I put it in a drawer. I didn't answer. I think about my grandmother sometimes. I think about the key she gave me. I think about what she said. "This is yours, Emily. Not your mother's, not your father's, yours." I didn't understand it then. I thought she was talking about the house. She wasn't. She was talking about the right to say no. Now, she was giving me the right to set down the weight I had been carrying. She was giving me the right to stop understanding. Visual. A porch. Morning light. A cup of coffee. I turned off my phone today. I sat on my porch. I watched the birds. I listened to the wind. I felt the weight of my own life settle around me, not as a burden, but as a shape, something I had built, something I had chosen, something that was mine. My name is Emily Ward. I am 38 years old, and I am still learning how to not owe anyone a single thing.